gave him only a part of us. Everybody lift your hands, please. And lift my hands in total praise. Surrender right now, surrender right now, surrender right now. Even before we get into the word. Surrender 100% everything. The stuff you ain't trying to give up, give up. In the name of Jesus. God says, I have greater pleasure for you than whatever it is you're trying to hold on to. I have greater peace for you, greater joy for you. Hallelujah. God, we surrender again. We love you. We praise you. We bless you, Lord. Have your way now. Speak through me, God. I don't want to say a word. You speak. In the name of Jesus, Lord, less of me, more of you. None of me, all of you. Lord, bless your people now, Lord, by your word that you will speak. Hallelujah, God. Use me, Lord, your imperfect vessel, God. We thank you for your righteousness, God, which makes us righteous through you. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Go ahead and take your seat. It's so important that we give God everything. He doesn't want your little, he doesn't want your some. He doesn't want your a lot. He wants your everything. Because it is in him that we live, move, and have our being. We can't do nothing without him. And when we submit ourselves under the hand of God, we maximize our effectiveness in the kingdom. Do me a favor now. Go to Mark chapter 6. Mark chapter 6. Mark chapter 6. And we're just going to read two verses. Verses 37 and 38. And if you don't mind, I'm going to read it in the New King James. Mark chapter 6, verses 37 and 38. Anybody glad to be alive? Amen. Thank God for being in the land of the living. Times in my life, I didn't think I would be here. I didn't think I would live 19. And that's real. But anyway, Mark chapter 6, verses 37 and 38. I'm going to read it in the New King James, and it's almost identical to the King James, just a little different. This is Jesus. But he answered and said to them, you give them something to eat. And they said to him, shall we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give them something to eat? But he said to them, how many loaves do you have? Go and see. And when they found out, they said 5 and 2 fish. 5 and 2 fish. For just a couple seconds, I want to talk from the topic, ministry on limited resources. Ministry on limited resources. You can take your seat. As most of you know, and perhaps some do not, I'm currently a sophomore at Morehouse College. And I thank my brother, Alice Kennedy, who came with me today, who's filling in for me. Amen. Amen. Put that together for him. Awesome man of God, awesome musician. But we're sophomores at Morehouse College. And at Morehouse and at any other school, really, you're required to declare a major. And as much as many of us think that we know everything, you are expected to choose a specific area of study with the expectation that you'll graduate with a firm grasp on something. And so my major is economics. And I love economics. And I know a lot of people who hate economics, but economics clicks for me. You get to talking about supply and demand, the intersection of the two creating equilibrium levels of price and output. You get to talking about indifference curve analysis and production functions and maximizing revenue and profits. I love all of that. But when you cut through the fluff and when you take away the formulas and the models, the premise of economics is really quite simple. Economics is simply the study of how people behave under conditions of scarcity. In other words, economics wants to understand how people deal with the reality of limited resources. And we have to make decisions about how much we will spend or save. How much we will spend on what? How much of one thing we're willing to give up for another. Because our resources are limited. And this being the Christmas season, many of us are more acutely aware of the reality of the limits on our resources. And that's pretty much the crux of what economics is. And so, in that sense, we find a great case study in economics here in the Word in Mark chapter 6. Now, verse 30 begins here. Then the apostles gathered to Jesus and told him all things, both what they had done and what they had taught. Now, the disciples had just returned from their first ministry trip without Jesus. They had seen him heal the sick. They had seen him raise the dead. They saw him cast out demons and do the miracles that no one else could do. And now it was their time, their first opportunity to march out and put into action what they had seen and been taught by Jesus. And so here in verse 30, they begin to give back a report to Jesus about all the things that they did. And they had a successful ministry trip. They laid their hands on sick folks and they saw them healed. They anointed folks. They cast out demons. They had a successful ministry trip. The things that the Lord told them to do, they did. Now, I need you to understand that if you are a believer, you have a ministry. You may not have a ministry to heal the sick and cast demons out of people like the apostles. You may not be in the music ministry or the dance ministry or the outreach ministry. You may not even be a part of the kitchen ministry, but you have a ministry. In fact, your life is a ministry. The word you speak is ministry. Your deeds are ministry. Everything about you is your ministry. And no believer is exempt from the call of God to go and do ministry. Amen. Because all ministry really is just a service that you render to or for someone else. And all of us have the responsibility by God to do ministry, to be a blessing to others in whatever way we can. So the apostles are giving Jesus their ministry report, and Jesus, seeing that they're tired and hungry and quite frankly probably burned out from doing really good ministry, he says here in verse 31, look y'all, we're going to slip away for a little while so you can get some rest. And you know, ministry can wear on you sometimes. It can be taxing. And I'm not just talking about official church stuff. Sometimes when you're doing one-on-one ministry, when you're just blessing somebody and they want you to be here and then somebody else wants you to be there and you're being pushed and pulled all these different directions, that gets taxing. Serving people gets a little taxing. But you know something that I've noticed? The best rest that you get is the rest you get after doing some ministry. Let me give you one example. Sunday naps. Sunday naps. Bless God. Pastor, you know, why you come on? You've been ministering for God. You've been blessing folks. And you get that nap. It's something about going to Mary Matt's or going somewhere and getting that Sunday meal and then going back to your house and taking that Sunday nap. Hallelujah. The best rest that you get many times is the rest that you get after blessing people. The rest that you get after doing some ministry. And so Jesus says, come on y'all, we're going to go to this deserted place away from all these folk so you can get some rest. All right, sounds good. But then something happens here in the text. The multitude see Jesus and the apostles. They see them getting in their boat. And so the multitudes, the crowds, the thousands of people, they start running on foot. And they beat Jesus and his crew to where they were going. They beat them to where they're going. So instead of sending the multitudes away when Jesus and his crew get there, Jesus gonna go and just have compassion on the people. And he's gonna start teaching them. So he flips the script. He changes the plan. Instead of turning the people away so that his disciples can get some rest, he begins ministering to the people. And I can imagine that at this point the apostles are frustrated. And many of us would be too. But the reason why Jesus did not turn the people away, the reason why he began to teach them, the reason why he began to meet their need is because he understood that the people needed something that only he had. And sometimes we as believers have to open our ears, we have to open our eyes, we have to open our hearts because there are sheep without a shepherd, without vision, without ambition, without guidance, and they need something that we have. And if we turn them away, where are they supposed to go? You may not feel like it. You may not think the time is right, but the people need something that you have. And you have a responsibility to minister to them. Selfish people are not fit for ministry. I'm not just talking about preaching, singing in the choir, playing an instrument. If you are a believer, you've been called to a life of ministry of serving other people, of getting uncomfortable, of getting dirty sometimes, because you got to bless somebody else. And if you're selfish, you're not fit. You're not fit for the kingdom if you're selfish. God wasn't selfish when he sent his only son to die for us. How dare we be selfish? Well, this is my time. I'm taking a personal day. I'm not in the mood. If you're selfish, you're not fit. So Jesus has compassion on the people, and he's teaching for a while. And the apostles, the crew, they look at the time. Now, they didn't have watches, but let's just imagine they had watches. So they're looking at the clock. Now, their time, they're probably, just look at the sky, the sun is going down. But they're looking at the clock. And they get Jesus' attention. They tap him on the shoulder. It's getting late. You've been feeding these folks spiritually. That's all well and good. But they got to eat some real food. And we don't have any to give them. So you got to wrap this up. Got to wrap it up, Jesus. Come on. You already done take some of our time. But look what Jesus says. He responds, you give them something to eat. Right there in the text. First one says, you give them something to eat. Now that's still the call from the church today. You give them something to eat. You give them something. You give them something to eat. So not only are the apostles at this point missing out on some rest, but now Jesus is actually asking them to do something. You give them something to eat. Now remember that the apostles had just returned from their very first ministry mission without Jesus. And so Jesus is still teaching his apostles at this point something else about ministry. It doesn't end when your program ends. It doesn't end when the trip ends. When you live a life of ministry, you don't always have the luxury of taking your own time, because ministry doesn't stop just because you ended your trip. Just because the time that you're doing it expired. Just because Sunday service is over. Ministry isn't over. Just because you had a great choir rehearsal, you had a great dance rehearsal, you went to that soup kitchen, ministry isn't over. You went to the brotherhood breakfast, that's nice, but ministry isn't over. When you're called to bless people, yeah, you can cast out demons, yeah, you can do this and you can do that, but can you meet the needs of the people? So they've been called back into active ministry. But the reality is, you can't do ministry without resources. We can only feed the people if we have food. Ministry requires resources. And I just thought about Rise Up and Build. Yes, Lord. I just thought about the capital campaign. Ministry requires resources. Pastor didn't ask me to plug it, so let me just keep moving. So when you're called into active ministry, you've got to have some resources. And there are things that we have to understand. The things that the text teaches us about resources as it pertains to effective ministry. And the first thing is this: we have to acknowledge the problem of our resources. We have to acknowledge the problem of our resources. The apostles can only feed the people if they have food to give them. And the reality is, they don't. Look at what the text says, second clause of verse 37. And they said to him, shall we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give them something to eat? Now that is a half a year's wages. Half of your salary for the year. So to say, is that what you're asking us to do? And sometimes God is calling us to do some things that we don't have the resources for at the time. And I'm not just talking about money. Yes, we need money, but you also have to have time. You also have to have patience. You have to have some faith. You have to have some peace. You got to have resources if you're going to do what God has called you to do. And what are we supposed to do when we are encountered with the problem of our resources? When we don't have enough to do what God has called us to do? How are we supposed to encourage people when we're not feeling encouraged ourselves? How are we supposed to bless other people when we're not feeling very blessed ourselves? Or how are we supposed to strengthen other people when we're just clinging to the little faith that we have? How can we feed the poor when we don't have enough to put on our own table and feed our own family? How do we do what you're telling us to do, Lord? I acknowledge that there's a problem with my resources, and I just don't have enough to do what you're asking me to do. So the disciples asked Jesus, what can we do? What do you suggest? Since you have this bright idea, what do you suggest? And so Jesus turns to them and he asks them very simply yet profoundly. You know, this is why I love Jesus, because he can speak in just simple sentences and get just a major point across. The problem is some of us talk too much. Anyway, Jesus says, how much do you have? Go and find out. How much do you have? Jesus, we have to send the people away. They have to eat. Jesus, you give them something to eat. Apostles, how are we supposed to do that? Jesus, how much do you have? Once they find out, they tell him, well, Lord, we've got 5 loaves and 2 fish. That's how much we have. Okay, so we've acknowledged the problem of our resources. Y'all know I like, peep words and stuff. But we also have to discern the purpose of our resources. There's a purpose for our resources. And the purpose of our resources is simply to be used to meet the needs of other people. Jesus says, how much do you have? Whatever you have, that's what God wants to use to be a blessing. Whatever you have, no matter how little of it that you have, it's got to be used to bless somebody else. And we notice in John chapter 6 where the same event is recorded and where we get a little bit more information, we find out that the 5 loaves and 2 fish came from a little boy in the crowd whose mother had likely packed him just some lunch for the day. But you see, it doesn't matter who you are. Jesus, God wants to use what you have to be a blessing to the multitude. So they had 5 loaves and 2 fish. That's what we got, Jesus. That's all we have. But this is where it gets fun. They bring what they have to Jesus. Verse 39, he commands the people to sit down in groups, in 50s and 100s. Verse 41, he looks up to heaven. Y'all, this is good. He blesses the food, he breaks it, and then he begins to distribute it to the disciples to give to the people. And somehow, the little bit they had, 2 fish and 5 loaves, that would have not been enough to even feed the apostles, is stretching to feed 5,000 men. And that's not even counting the women and children. So we've acknowledged the problem of our resources. We've discerned the purpose of our resources. But finally, we have to realize the potential of our resources. The potential of our resources. And it is this, that God will take what you already have and he'll expand its reach so that the little you have becomes enough to meet the need. The word never tells us that Jesus made more fish and loaves. All those people were fed. The text seems to indicate that capacity to be a blessing. It does not take God much. All it takes is what you already have. And when we commit what we have to God, He'll enlarge the capacity of our resources to meet the needs. See, this is divine economics. It doesn't matter how little we have. If we can commit it to God, it will always be enough. But wait, verse 42 says not only that the people ate, but that they were filled. Not only were they fed, they were filled. And so so what they had was not just enough to sustain the multitudes, it was enough to satisfy the multitudes. And then, verse 43, it says that 12 baskets were filled with the fragments that the multitudes left. Wow. So it wasn't just enough to feed the multitudes. It was enough to feed and fill the apostles' too. What was at first not enough to even feed them became enough for them to be blessed and for the people that were ministering to be blessed. Let me illustrate this for you, and I'm almost done. In the field of economics, there's a concept called the multiplier effect. Now, in fairness, this idea of the multiplier effect has been challenged. But the basic idea of it is that you pump either fiscal or monetary resources into it, into a certain sector of the economy, and that the overall effect on the economy will be greater than the amount that you put in. And so if I give this amount to sector A, when it makes its way through all of the other sectors of the economy, it's going to multiply itself. And see, God is our ministry multiplier. He's our ministry multiplier. And because He is limitless, it doesn't matter what the limit is on your resources. When you give it to Him, when He gives it back to you, and you begin to distribute it among the people, upon the people who you're supposed to be ministering to. When you begin to distribute it among the people that you're blessing, you begin to see that God will multiply and enlarge so that it will be enough to be the blessing. Now, you may not believe me, so let me just call one witness and then I'm sitting down. Come here, Zarephath widow, 1 Kings chapter 17. There was a drought in the earth. All she had was a little bread and a little oil. And she was working with limited resources. And she and her son were going to starve. But the prophet of the Lord came to her and said, give me what you have, and you'll have more than enough. And so she did so. And guess what happened? It was as the word said it would be. Her flour didn't run out, and her oil didn't run dry until the drought was lifted. What wasn't enough to sustain her became enough to sustain her whole household. When she committed what she had to God. Your resources may be limited. You may be low on peace. You may have just a little bit of joy. You may have funny money. Whatever it is that you lack. But when you give heed to the call of God on your life to bless somebody else before yourself, you'll always have more than enough of what you need. You'll have joy unspeakable and full of glory. You'll have peace that passes understanding. You'll have mountain-moving faith. You'll have power to walk, talk, and live right. You'll have every kind of provision. Because when God is in it, there is no limits. You may be dealing with the condition of scarcity. You may be working with limited resources. Whatever it may be. Praise God that some of us have been blessed to be financially stable. Praise God for that. And if that's not your area of lack, something else is. You may lack the joy that you need. You may lack the peace in your household that you need. And yet God is still calling you to do something that you don't have the capacity to do. But the reality is that when you give it to God, His ability to bless enlarges our capacity to be a blessing.